What's up, everybody? So, there are a lot of official Space Marine chapters out there, from GW and Forge World and the like. There's a lot of them out there. And that's great, when you think about it, because that means there's a lot of options for players should they want to play something that's official and not make up their own force. There's plenty of options, loads of flavor out there that can be catered to a lot of different players. The player base out there for Space Marines has a lot of options before even having to think about making up their own. And there's a lot of options for other factions as well, but Space Marines probably have some of the more numerous options. Even with all the options out there, most of them happen to fall within one of the codices available to play Space Marines, which is good. It's not a case of, man, I wish I could represent these guys, but there's really nothing out there for me. Chances are there's something out there that you feel would work well for representing the force you chose of whatever chapter. And I'm talking Imperial stuff. I'm not talking traders or anything like that. Um, with that said, however, there are chapters that I feel would definitely benefit from having something specifically catered to them. These chapters can be played, can be representative of what's out there now, but it's not, best scenario, quote unquote. And it really is a bit of a double-edged sword because, there's a lot of Space Marine content out there already for the miniature war game. How much more could they get away with producing, without really getting the community at large annoyed? Specifically the non-Space Marine players, getting Eldar, Dark Eldar, Necrons, Tau, Orcs, Chaos, and the like. Getting all of them having, content-rich stuff too is important. So it's one of those things where I don't foresee anything like this happening. It's just a nice little what if, theory rambling. And with that said, I'm not going to be going over all the ones I feel could benefit because I do feel a decent amount could, despite having so many options available to them right now. I do feel a decent amount could really benefit from having something specifically catered to them. I'm just going to go over a few here in this ramble, and feel free to share your thoughts on what chapters you feel could really benefit from having something catered to them, officially and all that. Again, looking at official chapters and the like. So, with that said, Lamenters. The Lamenters chapter is a chapter that as time goes on from first reading up about them and then seeing them, the more the time goes on, the more I really enjoy this chapter. It just has a nice feel and quality to it that I like. And even though they're yellow, and therefore kind of, scary to think about painting, especially with their symbol, being on that checkered black and white background, they're really cool. And it's not a force, however, I think could benefit from having its own codex. I think this is a case and a perfect example of where a supplemental book can really breathe life into something. The Lamenters have, somebody did point out that there is mention of them, or at least they're written about in some, like, a sentence within this Blood Angels Codex, and so that's cool. But having read through that codex a few times, and I guess just missing that, it's such a brief mention that it's almost not worth them being mentioned at all for how they were mentioned. No art, no miniature examples or anything. So I think if they had a supplement book for the Blood Angels Codex, it could work really well. I'm not going to go super in depth for each choice as to why, but just to continue kind of giving a why for the Lamenters. They're from the Curse Founding. Anything from the Curse Founding, in my opinion, could really benefit from having its own stuff catered to it. The Black Dragons, for example, are another one, which I'm not going to go into in this ramble, but that's another chapter I feel could benefit from having something specifically catered to it. But the Lamenters were in that Curse Founding. They're cursed themselves with this poor fortune and fate. They're supposed to be potentially immune to the Black Rage, Red Thirst, though it seems that perhaps it is starting to affect them, albeit at a much lesser level. Or maybe it always has and has kept hush-hush about it. But there's a lot to their fluff, and we see a bit more of it expanded upon in the Badab War book from Forge World that they're in. But there's a lot to their fluff that I feel can really be fleshed out and given special rules stuff, and maybe war gear item rules, or a whole unit potential, or specific things catered to them that could really chop up how the Blood Angels Codex would be used to represent Lamenters. I think they could really benefit from that, because that codex works well for really every other Blood Angel successor. The Lamenters are just this weird kind of case where it's like you could do it, but if they had some stuff specific to them, it would be better. Moving right along, the Black Templars. Now, the Black Templars are a perfectly viable force to play. Now, they're a chapter tactic in the Space Marine Codex. So they're one of the few that has something catered to them officially through GW, right? Because there is stuff for the Lamenters and some of the others I'm going to mention from Forge World, but that's really just for fun, casual games, not anything that would be officiated by. But anyway, the Black Templars have something in a codex. I understand that. There are those that say it's useless and worthless to play with. They might as well use a different chapter tactic, but you can say that for any chapter tactic. Why go Imperial Fist when you can go White Scar or Ultramarine? So the Black Templar have their own chapter tactic, and they're perfectly viable to play. They have the Crusader squad and so on. But they really feel like they have been nipped and pruned down. And I feel if anything were to get a codex, from what I'm going to mention, for having had one and lost it, I think they deserve to have it back. Now again, I do think they're perfectly viable to play as they are now, and you can have it feel very Black Templar-like, and you can do very well with it. Completely feel that way, 100%. But I think they could do so much with these guys having their own codex, the way things get fleshed out and the way they're doing rules for stuff and squad upgrades and all that. I think we could have a really cool Crusader-style feeling of codex for the Space Marines with the Black Templars. So, would love to see that. Probably will never happen, but that'd be really cool. I think they are deserving of it. Plus, they could make up units instead of just giving them what they used to have. Sword Brethren could actually be something interesting and unique. Maybe introduce a whole new unit for them or whatever. So, anyways, that's the Black Templars. Now, another chapter I feel could really make good use of being catered to is the Mentors chapter. The Mentors, or the Mentor Legion, whatever you want to call them, is a tough thing to truly cater to if you're going to do their whole loaning out squads to lead, guardsmen and the like in battle, or to be advisors in battle or stuff like that. But their whole R&D, field testing, experimental weaponry stuff, that whole shebang, if you will, I think could be catered to pretty nicely, either as a supplement or a codex. I mentioned how Black Templars should really be a full-on codex, and I mentioned how Lamenters really benefit from being a supplement. I think the Mentors could go either way. I think this is a case where they could go either way, being a supplement to a regular Space Marine codex, or having their own codex. Either way could work. You can give them some interesting weaponry, some interesting special rules, warlord traits, even some interesting relics of war, whatever the case may be, to kind of get the Mentor chapter feel. I may mention in their at a glance that they could make use of the Deathwatch Codex to really get that feel because of the special tech in there. And that's true, but that's not really being catered to. That's making use of something a little bit outside the box. So I think the Mentors could definitely benefit from having a little bit more to them in terms of being catered to them. From that, we go to a chapter I'm a big fan of, the Exorcist chapter. This chapter, its fluff screams give us something special. They have 2 extra scout companies because of their highly unorthodox methodology of making Space Marines. I go into it in the at a glance, basically, but to quickly summarize it, they are anti-demon warfare specialists. Not exactly like the Grey Knights are at all, but they are. Each Space Marine has been possessed by a lesser entity of the warp and then had that entity banished through their own will and through banishment. And this results to them having a particular clarity of warfare and a particular specialty, and being particularly arcane and ritualistic and all that. And it's thought that they are successors of the Grey Knights themselves, and that would be pretty unique, being the only other chapter to have that gene seed makeup at the very least. So there's a lot going on there with the Exorcist that could really benefit. I think, I don't think a supplement could do justice for them far enough. I think they would really benefit from a full-on codex to really tap into the concept of their creation, how Space Marines are made into Exorcists, basically, or how the Exorcists are created and founded, and how they recruit and turn their initiates into full-fledged Space Marines. I think that could really be awesome with army-wide special rules that you would get from a codex, and special units and characters same way, and so on. That would be a really cool force for sure. I would pick up that codex if they had one. They get Forge World stuff. They have a chapter tactic from Forge World, I believe, or they can use whatever chapter tactic. I forget how it is done in Forge World, but Forge World is a special character for them, just like the Lamenters. But it's not... that form of treatment wouldn't be enough if UW did it. I think they would need a full-on codex. And lastly is the Blood Ravens. Yes, the Blood Ravens. How could I forget the Blood Ravens? The answer is I didn't. But these guys are responsible, I think, for a good amount of players in 40k nowadays, especially at the height of the Dawn of War 1 and 2 game popularities. Dawn of War 3 coming is going to probably do something very similar. And they're a really unorthodox chapter when you look at how they're represented in the video games. They have cool different relic stuff. They have a representation of a captain with a heavy bolter. They have that whole tendency, they had that librarian chapter master issue, but the point is they have a lot of stuff going on, both in their Index of Star Chase write-up in the video games and in some other fluff that they are mentioned. It would be really cool to have them fleshed out, and I think they are another chapter that could be really fleshed out well with their own codex. You could get away with a supplement for these guys as well, but I think it would be a pretty radical supplement in terms of what it would introduce. If they were to get something like that, I think they'd be way better off with a full-fledged codex to represent them. That would really work well. It could be an interesting blending of kind of how they are in terms of having stuff from a whole bunch of like relics from different chapters just happen to be in the armory, a la Dawn of War 2 style. It would be interesting because you could have, I think, having a codex for them that could represent a captain with a heavy weapon, a librarian dreadnought maybe, something that you typically see in the Blood Angels stock, but they have as well, and then maybe something else going on with librarians and something else going on with relics of war and some interesting army-wide special rule stuff. I think that'd be really cool to see for the Blood Ravens. So that's the last one I'm going to bring up in this ramble. Lamenters, Black Templars, the Mentors, Exorcists, and Blood Ravens, I think, can really benefit from getting some more stuff, or some stuff really catered to them specifically, from GW. I think that could really be nice, or would be, but I don't think it'll happen, as I mentioned earlier, with Space Marines having a lot of stuff already. So that's some of the chapters that I think could really benefit from this. There are more out there that I have thought about, and feel free to share your thoughts. So hopefully you've enjoyed this ramble. Hopefully it was interesting for some of you. And until next one, if you have any questions, comments, or requests for anything, post in the comment section, and take it easy.